Oh, it didn't come up. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, looks like we don't need to. It hasn't come up on that one. So I've hit record on this one, so that's good. All right, well, welcome everybody. We've got some people here for the first time. If you don't know how to find us online, make sure afterwards you do. There's a sheet out there with our website, and you can look up all the different times that we meet, because we meet for Zazen meditation online every morning and every evening, almost Monday to Saturday in the mornings and Monday to Friday in the evenings. And then we're here in person once a week. And welcome to our Sangha online. I'll talk a little bit about how we relate to discipline in the Zen tradition. Zen discipline. It's a little different to regular discipline, the way we think of it. We tend to think of discipline as improving something or adding something or gaining something. You know, like trying to get more fit, for example, to build up our muscular strength, or to gain a degree, to acquire knowledge. And these are fine forms of discipline. They're wonderful. But in the Zen discipline, it's a little different. It's got a subtlety to it, because it's not so much about gaining something as learning how to reveal something to ourselves. So rather than trying to make ourselves a better person, we're training ourselves to notice that we are already a Buddha, that we are already wise. So we're not trying to add something, we're trying to see something, we're practicing seeing something. So it's got a very different quality to it, but it is nevertheless a discipline. It does take effort, a special type of effort. One of the ways in which we make an effort is simply to turn up to Zazen, to turn up and be part of a Sangha. But it also involves turning up in all sorts of other places. Turning up with our families, with our work colleagues, with our neighbourhood. Turning up with our bodies, but also turning up with our minds. Being present to people, being present to the environment. So turning up is probably our greatest form of discipline. Just to do it. And in our particular school, the kind of doing it is Zazen, and often doing Zazen together. So that's the main way in which we discipline ourselves. And it's kind of quiet. It often involves just getting up in the morning when the alarm goes off. And it might be cold outside of the blankets. We don't quite want to have to throw them off and step our feet onto the cold ground. We might just not quite want to do that. But we just do it. We just do it. Because the Buddha's original teaching is that there is suffering in this world. And we can either suffer from trying to resist suffering, which might look like not bothering to turn up. I don't want to be cold. I don't want to make the effort. And then over time we suffer anyway from maybe restlessness or self-doubt, a sense of like what, a kind of doubt about what's the point of my life, something like that. or I'm not good enough, because we're not making an effort. So we are going to actually suffer. It's just the Buddha's first teaching. Everyone is actually going to. But what we can do is we can choose that suffering to actually be kind of joyful, meaningful, purposeful, beneficial. So we have this little bit of suffering that we choose, which is to turn up. It's not a lot of painful suffering, it's just that little bit. The alarm goes off at 5:30 and we get up. Just do it, we just get up. So then the suffering that we will inevitably have anyway, it actually turns out to be a sort of suffering that we feel a satisfaction that we navigated it. You know, we got to the end of the day and you go, but yeah, it was a good day. Not it was an easy day. Although we do actually develop a deep ease when we're disciplined year after year and see the benefit of that discipline, of that choosing of these little moments of suffering, you could say. By choosing that little bit of discomfort over comfort, we actually do develop a deep ease, and we don't even think of it as suffering so much anymore. It's just what we do. It's just our Zen way of life. And the more that we practice like that, the more faith we have, the more trust we have. Oh yes, this is a really good way to suffer. This is the way to do it. This is much better. This is much better than just being knocked about by the troubles of the world and the thoughts that we have about ourselves and other people, and suffering anyway. Much better to suffer in a way that feels meaningful and satisfying. It's kind of really just, I keep noticing how much I appreciate Buddha's first teaching. I didn't used to really appreciate it that much. I kind of was more interested in Buddha nature teachings and emptiness teachings. The Buddha's teaching on suffering was a bit like, oh, okay. I get it, but I'm more interested in these sort of esoteric things about Buddha nature. But now I keep thinking, whoa, in the mornings when I just make myself get up like that, it's just a teeny bit of effort. It doesn't hurt much because I know I'm going to be totally glad about it a few minutes later. Just that teeny bit. So when we discipline ourselves in this way, then when actual difficulties do come around, which they always do, we have already trained our minds. We've already trained our bodies. And so we can attend to that difficulty skillfully. Because what we do in Zazen is we're noticing our thoughts. This is one of our main meditation practices. So we're noticing our thoughts. So rather than just being kind of caught inside our thoughts and not even noticing what our thoughts are and just going along with them, you know how people have a trail of thinking and they don't even notice that they're doing it. They might have been driving for 10 minutes. They haven't noticed the environment. And they're completely absorbed in this. It's like watching a movie in our heads. We're watching a movie in our minds. We don't even know that we're doing it. And it's often not a terribly nice movie. The stories that we tell ourselves are often not always that pleasant. So when we do Zazen, we become really familiar with what these particular storylines are that we have. We get to know them, and we learn not to be so caught by them. We just notice them. We just notice them and just let them go past. And instead we have this little act of Zen discipline where we go in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath. And then we might start thinking again, and then we go, oh. In-breath. Out-breath. And I'm saying in-breath, out-breath, but we just notice the in-breath and the out-breath. We don't even need to call it in-breath or out-breath, but we do notice it. So that's a little moment of discipline where we say to ourselves, rather than doing this, following of this strain of thinking, I'm going to just notice my breathing. And so we do that over and over and over. Many, many times in one period of Zazen do we engage in that act of discipline, noticing that we're thinking. We don't get angry about our thinking, we just notice our thinking. And we come back to our breathing. We don't judge the thinking, we just don't get involved. And we come back to our breath. So that little act of discipline then translates into being able to be disciplined in the middle of the night when we wake up and think, oh my gosh, I've forgotten this thing I was supposed to do yesterday. Maybe we have a thought like that, and then we start worrying about it, let's say. We can say to ourselves at 2 o'clock in the morning, in-breath, out-breath. I will think about that later. I won't think about it now. I need to sleep now. So we can actually do that. We've been disciplining ourselves for however long we've been practicing, so that actually instead of saying, I don't want to think about that, but we keep thinking about it, we can say, I don't think it's good to think about that, and then we can stop thinking about it. We are a very powerful person when we can do that, when we can choose to not think about something because it's not the right time to think about it, or it's not a useful thing to think. Become a much more powerful person when we can do that. When we can simply say, not now, or that is not helpful. But that takes discipline. People have tried to just tell themselves not to do something. It doesn't work. You can't just tell yourself. But you can have this type of Zen discipline in these very simple little ways, by turning up with our bodies, by practicing looking with our eyes at things. Just look at things, just see things, just hear things, instead of being seduced by ideas in our heads. Because the mind's going to think anyway, that's just what it does, but we don't have to make it the centre of our world. We can make the centre of our world be the present moment that we are in. That can be the dominant thing in our life, the present moment that we're in. And that's just really great, to have the discipline, to bring our attention primarily to the present moment that we're in. It's really beneficial in all sorts of ways. In the most simple way for ourselves, the present moment is pretty much always interesting. There's so much in the present moment compared to what our thoughts are. Our thoughts don't tend to have as much sort of depth to them as just the incredible magnificence of the moment. Even an empty room is incredibly interesting if you give your full attention to it. Even just the corner of where the carpet meets the wall, where the floor meets the wall, or where a wall meets a window. Even that is incredibly interesting if you give your attention to it. Even the sound of traffic is quite interesting if you give your full attention to it. It's actually generally a lot more interesting than the sort of random types of thoughts. Not really random. The thoughts that just seem to just kind of flow on one after the other with no particular purpose to them. Looking at where the wall meets a window is actually more interesting. Which isn't to say that we don't have interesting thoughts. We do. One part of practice is contemplation, but it's much more intentional I am intentionally contemplating. We can say to ourselves, I'm really thinking about how everything is interconnected. That's very intentional, and that becomes very interesting. But that's got an intentionality to it. It's not just what's sort of happening. It's not just noise in the background of our minds. So this is the kind of discipline that we talk about in the Zen tradition. It's to reveal reality to us, not to try and make reality into something. And unexpectedly, when we really engage with reality just naturally without adding a whole lot of things to it, we tend to be skillful, and therefore we actually tend to be a benefit to the world, and we are in fact making it a better place. But we don't try to make the world a better place. We try to simply see it as it is. This is the kind of discipline. It's a non-gaining sort of discipline that we have. And one of the things that's so beautiful about it is we can be doing it the whole time that we're awake. And actually we can do it in our dreams. But generally speaking, we can do it while we're awake. So we've got all of these hours in which we can simply exercise this little piece of sort of awareness to just pay attention to our breath for a few seconds, or just listen for a few seconds, or just notice for a few seconds. We can do that so many times in the day, and after a while it starts to become who we are and starts to become what we do. And then when actually difficult problems come, we are really well equipped when difficult problems come to actually respond skillfully to something difficult. And I think it's pretty hard to go through life without having at least a few very difficult things happen. Often many, many. But maybe if we've had a fairly blessed life, maybe only a few really big difficult things, but we will get them. And so this kind of discipline and this faith and trust in this type of discipline means when those difficult times come, we can be present for them rather than trying to avoid them, rather than trying to get away from them. We can hear what somebody says, maybe without jumping to defensiveness, for example, or jumping to judgment. We can actually just hear what that person's saying. Can we just completely hear what they're saying, even if we maybe don't like the sound of it? Someone might be criticizing us or sharing a point of view that we don't agree with, like superficially, like on some level we don't agree with. But if we're very, very present-minded, we can fully hear them before having our opinions cut in and colour our experience. We can just fully be for that person in that moment. And it's more likely to result in a beneficial kind of exchange. So I took a few notes. I often don't look at my notes, but I'll just have a little look at them. I think I've more or less said everything I wrote in my notes. I might read a few words of Suzuki Roshi's on this. We often talk about in terms of effort, and we sometimes call it effortless effort. So it's a kind of effort, but it's not the conventional sort of effort. Suzuki Roshi says a few things about that here. This is a talk that got titled Right Effort. The most important point in our practice is to have right or perfect effort. Right effort directed in the right direction is necessary. If your effort is headed in the wrong direction, especially if you are not aware of this, it is deluded effort. Our effort in our practice should be directed from achievement to non-achievement. This was a strong theme of Suzuki Roshi's of that we're not trying to gain anything, this no gaining idea. Really central part of his teaching, no gaining idea. And it's a little confusing for people because there is a sort of a gaining aspiration that we have. You know, we want to not suffer in terms of unnecessary suffering. Most things that people suffer actually is through their thoughts rather than through the things that happen to our bodies from the world. There is that sort of suffering. Things happen to us, like we get hurt or we get sick or someone we love leaves us or a job gets lost and so on, those sorts of things. Those things happen. But even those things, how we respond to them is very much affected by our thinking, how painfully we experience them is profoundly affected by how we understand those things. So most of our suffering is in our minds. By far, the majority of our suffering is generated in our minds. So there is a kind of, we are wanting to not do that so much. So in that sense, we do have a goal. But I think there's something a little different between an aspiration and having a specific goal to get or get rid of something. Because this aspiration really, like I said at the start, is really to just, we kind of intuitively know that we're okay, but we somehow with our thinking mind think we're not okay. Or maybe deep down we intuit that other people are okay, but somehow with our thinking mind we think they're not okay. So this effort is to reveal, in ways like to shed the delusions, to reveal what we deeply know, that we're okay. You know, like the way a little 2-year-old thinks they're amazing. Or a little 4-year-old thinks they're amazing. They run around being superheroes and things. They unself-consciously think they're just incredible. It's kind of, that's it, that's true actually. They are incredible. And we sort of start to think, well, maybe I'm not so great, maybe I'm not so amazing as we grow older. So you could say that this non-achievement is just to come back and discover our true nature, our okayness, and everybody else's okayness. Which is not to say that people act in ways that are harmful, because of course they do. But they're acting in ways that are harmful because of their deluded ideas, not because of their essentialness. They're not essentially bad. They've just got mistaken views and are being harmful. So I'd like to encourage us all to actually really respect and value discipline. Discipline is great. It doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to be harsh. It will be a tiny bit painful, like in the knees. It might be painful in the knees. It's sometimes hard to sit 30 minutes or 40 minutes of Zazen. It hurts sometimes. Sometimes it hurts in our body and sometimes it hurts in our mind. But we just do it. We just do it anyway. This is the thing. Just do it. Just turn up. We start off having a little bit of faith based on what we see other people say it's a good idea. For hundreds of years, people have been saying it's a good idea to meditate. Thousands of years, actually. It's a good idea just to sit and do nothing some of the time and just observe. It's in all different spiritual traditions. There's some element of just sit there and do nothing in particular and just observe. So we start off having faith that way, kind of like we've heard that it's a good idea, And then after a while, maybe a couple of years, or maybe even a couple of months, we really start to go, oh, this is really good. Even if I don't quite want to do it, I know that I will benefit from it, so I do it. So we turn up. We turn up to Zazen, and we can turn up to retreats. Retreats are a fantastic way to really cultivate discipline. This year we will be having 3 retreats this year. One in January we had one in June, and we're having one in December. So maybe it would be nice to have a bit of conversation together. So I'll end this bit and see if anybody here in the room wants to ask a question or share a thought or an experience, and same with people online. We can sort of see the people online there on the screen. So would anybody like to share something or ask a question? Fiona.
Thanks, Neti. I've been studying Suzuki Roshi, just listening to the audio book, Crooked Cucumber, and it's quite a long audio book. And it talks about when he would hit the students in the Zendo with the staff. And it talked about how he might hit a student to wake them up, but it might be for the person sitting next to them. Yeah, I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about, so it might be for the person sitting next to them that they get the lesson, without receiving the stick.
Yeah, I remember hearing that part in the book Crooked Cucumber, which if you haven't read, recommend, or it's an audio book, The Life of Suzuki Roshi, written by David Chadwick. And he actually does the audio book, which is wonderful to have one of Suzuki Roshi's disciples actually read the book that he wrote about his life. Yeah, that was a very beautiful thing that Suzuki Roshi had. It was before my time. He came to America the year I was born in Australia, so I never got to meet him. And then he was only in the United States for 12 years before he passed away. But this is how we get to be this Sangha here, through what he did for those 12 years. And a great example of turning suffering into something beneficial. It was a difficult thing to establish a Zen tradition in the United States at that time. There was some, but not very much. And in a short amount of time, with enormous effort on his part, he built a very large community in San Francisco and in the areas around San Francisco. And it was not easy. There were so many difficulties. But the benefit of all of the effort that he put in that way, he chose a sort of discipline to benefit Americans. He had this love for Americans. It was just beautiful. From very early, he said, I'm going to become American soil. So going from Japan, post-Second World War, where America had been bombing Japan, he went to the States to bring the best of Japanese culture to America. The wisdom of the Buddhist tradition that had come from India through China to Japan and into Korea and Vietnam and across to the United States and to Australia and of course to Europe as well and South America. It's spread everywhere now, New Zealand. So one of his skillfulnesses was working with his students. So Fiona's mentioning how sometimes he would be harsh with one student, but he would say, if I'm harsh with you, I might not be doing it for you, but I'm doing it because I know you're strong enough to feel that discipline, but I'm actually doing it for somebody else who's not quite ready to receive it from me directly. This was kind of beautiful. And in a similar vein, in terms of sometimes conversations in the Zendo, sometimes we ask a question that somebody else would like to ask but is a little bit too shy to ask. So it's a kind of a discipline too, to actually ask a question or share an experience, share a thought, because there's somebody else that maybe would like to, but they're not quite feeling brave enough to take the risk. Because it does take a risk to speak in a common space. It's a risk. We have to risk sounding foolish. And Scott Tyler's got a question or a comment.
Hi, Neti.
Hi, Scott.
Sorry, I missed you when you were in Santa Cruz. I don't know if you know, Bernice and I moved to Fresno for 10 months to watch our grandkid. So I was trying to get back for Sarah's thing. I wanted to say hi to Sarah's Reverend McClellan, but I see she stepped off. And it's good to see the pictures were fabulous. Saw Jack leading the march there. I hope she had a great time there. It's funny you talk about Zen discipline, and it's different than other types of discipline, and it's slower to manifest itself. And I was just reading this morning in Training the Mind and Cultivating Loving Kindness, the exact same thing you were saying, that I think you recommended this book as well, that whatever you meet refers to any sudden occurrence in your life that could be difficult, and that whatever you meet, any situation you come across, should be joined immediately with meditation. Whatever shakes you should, without delay, right away, be incorporated into the path. Seeming obstacles can be accommodated on the spot through the sudden spark of awareness. The idea is not to react right away to either painful or pleasurable situations. The discipline of carrying whatever occurs in our life onto the path, which is connected with patience and non-aggression. Very helpful. Thank you.
Is that Norman Fisher's book?
No, that's Chogyam Trungpa. Sure, I'm butchering his name, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Yes. Yeah, there was lots of people I didn't get to see face to face, unfortunately, but that's what happens.
When did you get back?
It was a wonderful ordination ceremony, and it was fantastic to be with everybody in Santa Cruz for the 9 days.
Nice.
There.
Yeah, Sarah was radiant there in the pictures, and you were wearing your white socks, so it was an auspicious occasion. I asked Patrick when he married Bernice and I in the garden at the Zen Center if he'd wear his white socks, and he said he would. So I always noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned the word patience too, because I think that requires a lot of discipline to be patient. And patience is a fantastic virtue. To be patient with ourselves, as well as to be patient with others. It kind of takes a lot of faith in the present moment to be patient. I don't have to solve this in this instant. I don't have to jump in this moment. I can just pause and just listen and let something just sort of penetrate, take some time. Yeah. Jamal?
I think that what you were saying at the start resonated very strongly with me. The idea that suffering is going to happen anyway, and you may as well choose the type of suffering you want to a book I read by Haruki Murakami, which I think some of the Buddhist nature of the teaching might be lost in the specifics of the translation, but he writes about marathon running that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I think we might phrase it slightly differently in Buddhism with the use of suffering, but yeah, that idea that that something's gonna hurt one way or another, and how you engage with that and the choices we make to how we feel that, and what type of relationship we have with that is the thing that we have some kind of agency over.
Yeah, Buddhism actually often does, it is often described that way, that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. That's also used. And I like to think of it as the sort of, in the phenomenal world, the world of experiences through our senses, there's going to be things that are going to happen, and that's inevitable. But what we do with our minds, that additional suffering, that is optional. But it only becomes optional if we've kind of cultivated discipline to make it optional. Otherwise, it just happens and we can't stop it. The way people want to stop thinking a thought and they can't. People can suffer their whole lives thinking a thought and they can't get rid of it. People can have a whole life of having a lens of I'm not good enough lens, or everybody has it better than me, or they're all idiots. People can have a lens like that for their whole life, and they might even want to get rid of it, but they haven't found a way. But there is a way, and this is our way. It's not the only way, but this Zen discipline way is one way, and that's the way that we have. Yeah. Ross, joining us from Mexico.
Hi, nice
Hi.
to see you again. You said there were some new people in the room, and so I thought maybe I would share what might be an encouraging story about discipline and no gating idea. I'm a Zen priest in Suzuki Roshi's lineage, and I started practicing about 36 years ago. I've had a lot of training in the San Francisco Zen Center lineage and with Santa Cruz Zen Center, and I've been a staff priest on several other temples and had my own temple in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And all I ever wanted to be for the last 30 years was a priest, a Zen priest, and I was a good priest. And then I got brain damage, and the whole thing kind of was blown to smithereens. My temple fell apart, my life fell apart. I was on staff still several times in different Zen settings, but every time it seemed to be going fine, but the universe made it clear that no, you're not supposed to do this anymore. It happened 4 times in a row. And finally, on the 4th time, I said, I guess maybe I'm not supposed to have an ordinary human life now anymore. Is that correct? And that was kind of confirmed. And I can't really sit anymore. I don't have the nervous system capability to sit still and quietly and have the peace and ease that I used to have in sitting. And so really, absolutely everything about my Zen career or beingness doesn't exist anymore. And it would be really easy to feel very bad about that pretty much all the time. And this lecture here this evening, well, it's evening for me, I guess it's morning for you, has helped me to realize that I'm actually doing very well with Zen discipline by just being with things as they are now in each moment, even though they might not look anything like the way I was thinking my life might be like by about now. I'm in my 60s. So I want to thank you for helping me see that even though I had no gaining idea, and even though I did actually gain a lot in a manner of speaking, in a kind of conventional human way of looking at things, and then I lost it all, at the same time, those years of practice are serving me now, even while I can't really kind of do that specific practice any longer. And so for the new people, the reason I'm telling this long rambling story is to let you know that there is a benefit to practice, and you can't tell what it is very quickly. In fact, you shouldn't even try to tell what it is until you've been practicing for at least 20 years. Then it might be an appropriate time to stop and look back and say, how was I before I began this practice, and how am I now, and what do I think about that? But it's such a subtle, deep to the bone level kind of an impact that it has that you won't be able to tell. So don't measure it by ordinary human, I'm doing this to achieve an outcome kind of ways of measuring things, because that just, it's not the right way to do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Russ.
Yoo!
And you do turn up. That's what you do, Russ. You turn up. So that is good. All right. I think we might be. Did you have something? you wanted? No. All right. So we finish with the second chant, and I'd like to do it 3 times. We were doing it just once, but we'll do it 3 times, and that way I can get up and finish my. Oh no! But we want to all bow together. Yeah, let's just do it once so we can all bow together. And we'll just have to figure out how to fit in the room. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.